a story out of the first Patriots OTAs was that Drake Maye was taking third team reps. Was the quarterback taking third team reps for the Patriots offense. That means that he was running behind Jacoby Brissett and behind Bailey Zappi. Now, should definitely caveat that Jerod Mayo was asked if it was correct to say that those reps were going to be divided similarly throughout the remaining OTAs, particularly sessions that reporters weren't going to be able to see. And he said, no, don't assume that what's happening today is what's happening the next time, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm inclined to say this is the one where I think it's mostly silliness, or perhaps entirely silliness, because I think it is just so clear that Drake Maye is obviously thoroughly in the Patriots' plans. I will say it's interesting to me that Bailey Zappi is getting the second team reps, just because Bailey Zappi is a player who I don't look at as being in New England's long-term plans. So I have a little bit of a question here of just like, what is it about Drake Maye, or what is it about what the Patriots want right now that leads them to think that, you know, those reps are more valuable for Bailey Zappi, or it's more valuable for the team as a whole for Bailey Zappi to be running with the twos over Drake Maye. However, I really think that the idea that this, because this has been a little bit of subject of some consternation, befuddlement, making up words in New England. I think the idea that this says that Drake Maye is somehow like behind or struggling is like really silly to me. He was always going to be a player who was going to need some sort of like fundamental work, back to basics. Let's build this quarterback from the ground up. He's probably not going to start right away. It's much more important that he is ready to win games in 2025, 2026, 2027 than like anything that could possibly happen this season for the Patriots. And the fact that they were drilling a lot of footwork very heavily just says to me that they're kind of, he's a lump of clay and they want to build it from the ground up, which I think is a smart strategy. So I am going silly all the way on this being a thing. Steven, you are quarterback guru. If you saw Drake Maye hopping out there running behind Bailey Zappi at Patriots OTAs, would you think twice about it?
No, like if it's August and this is still happening, then I don't think it's silly anymore. I think it's kind of sad. But right now, I think
silly, serious, or sad.
The priority is, yeah, right. The priority is like getting this young offense together and to gel. And I think if you have a quarterback who needs his hand held through calling plays, getting through a huddle, getting people lined up, like why would you waste reps on that instead of repping him on footwork and stuff that could actually help him improve down the line? I think this is silly. I don't think the idea that Drake Maye isn't ready to start though is silly. And I think like if that's what you're reading from these tea leaves, then I think that's fine. I don't think you're being silly. And it's not surprising. I think Jacoby Brissett is like a starter in this league. And I'm kind of surprised he hasn't been able to start over the last couple of years. So if Drake Maye does start the season on the bench, I don't think it's a red flag at all. He has to overcome a really good quarterback, relatively speaking, to get that week one starter's job.
Yeah,
that's what I was. Oh, sorry. I was just going to. Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering, because I remember like in January or February, that was a legit conversation that if the Patriots draft Drake Maye, do you sit him as a rookie? When do you play him? What can he handle? And, that's a little bit about Drake Maye. That's a little bit about the sort of supporting cast and all the change in New England this offseason. So Nora, what do you think? Like, what's the percentage chance you think in your mind right now that Drake Maye starts in week one? Or do you have a week where you're like, that's the over under for when he gets out there? Or are you just expecting him to be out there when the season starts?
And let me pull up the Patriots schedule here. I think the odds that he is out there when the season starts, I don't know. I guess I would say 10% or something like that. I mean, I don't think there is any hard and fast rule there, or that, Elliot Wolf is thinking about, or that Jerod Mayo is thinking about, that says Drake Maye will not start in week one. But I do think that I don't think that is like meaningful to them in any way other than if Drake Maye starts in week one, I'm sure they'd be thrilled about it because it would mean that he had beaten out Jacoby Brissett, which I think, as Steven said, is going to be no small feat and would mean that Drake Maye is probably, like, maybe leaps and bounds is a little strong, but I think that would mean that Drake Maye is significantly ahead of where the Patriots expect him to be in week 1. And that which fits perfectly with, like, who they thought he was when they drafted him with the 3rd overall pick, right? Like, when they made that selection, I think they felt that they were drafting a quarterback whose best interest was not necessarily going to be served by starting right away, particularly within a roster context that's, relatively weak. And I think that has to do with, why Jacoby is the guy who's there. I think beating out Jacoby Brissett would be pretty tough, particularly for a player like Drake Maye, who I think was a great pick. I think is a really talented player, but who needs a lot of work. I mean, they're running these drills, which, are relatively common, but it looked like there were some really good videos. I think Chad Graff from The Athletic posted a bunch of them. So if people want to go check it out, they can do that, where they devoted what looked like a lot of time during those OTAs or during the first one to, like, pretty basic footwork drills where the quarterbacks they would take different dropbacks, and then there were different, like, bags set up. So they would have to go back in a straight line. If they, boot it out in one direction, like, they have to do it in a certain way where they end up in the right spacing around the bag and they don't run into the bag. And there were a couple times when Drake Maye ran into the bag, he kicks it over and then he has to do it again. And so it's clearly like they're working on that fundamental stuff, which I think is the right way to go about it. Again, I'm sure the Patriots would be thrilled if Drake Maye started in week 1 for them, because I think it would mean that he was, like, way ahead of the schedule that they think is reasonable. And ultimately, the difference between that, like, being ready for one of the first few weeks of the season versus, hopping in even in, like, December, right, is just not ultimately that meaningful, because I just don't think that this Patriots season is about what happens in 2024. It's about next year and the year after and beyond that. I'm looking at the schedule. I'm trying to figure out where I think would be the most reasonable spot. I mean, they start with
you look at the schedule, and then I want to come back and say, wait, pick the game that you think he's going to start Ruiz. Do you agree that you see him starting the season on the bench?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think it's really a statement about him. I just think Brissett is that good of a quarterback. Like, I'm not saying Jacoby Brissett's a top 15, top 10 type of quarterback, but I do think he's a top 20, 25 level quarterback. And I think that's hard to unseat as a rookie. But, like, if you're a Patriots fan, these are the things that you are not concerned about Drake Maye having to work on or put in extra work on, like footwork, like getting in and out of the huddle. Like, that's a question of, does he know how to play? That's not a question of, can he play? If he had if he was getting outplayed by Bailey Zappi and outplayed by Jacoby Brissett in training camp and in preseason, I would be concerned. But, like, this is the stuff you expect him to have to work on, and he's going to be better for it. And, like, when we look back at all the quarterbacks who have worked that did sit on the bench, usually the thing that changed most with them is their footwork. Like, Aaron Rodgers became a totally different passer when he was on the bench, when he was sitting on the bench, like, in terms of mechanics, fluidity, and all that. He was a rigid passer before. Patrick Mahomes, like, if you go back to his Texas Tech tape, he throws a pass, you can't even tell what direction he's throwing the pass in based on his feet, because they're all over the place. And he's become a much better passer. And I think sitting on the bench helped. So it's not just like, I'm not just being like, oh, we've seen other guys sit on the bench and work out. It's this style of quarterback that has sat on the bench and then eventually worked out.
Yeah, you don't want them to develop. I'm always in favor of, you can't, simulate the actual game reps. And so if you're not going to shatter a guy's confidence and that he's able to work on things while playing, I'm generally in favor of that. But at the same time, we've seen other times where that just messes somebody up and they do develop bad habits. So I think that's probably what they're weighing. All right, Nora, what do we got? You're looking at the schedule. Do we have a game where we're going to say this is going to be a Drake Maye game?
Well, so here's the thing, is that I think the most reasonable one is all the way in week 15, because the Patriots have a late bye. Their bye is in week 14. So that would be Patriots at Cardinals, week 15, you have the bye week to get him ready, and then finish out with Cardinals, Bills, Chargers. Bills are the last 4 opponents. Bills obviously a tough divisional opponent. Chargers could surprise some people this year, but that would be the situation in which he does play this year, but they wait basically as long as possible. I mean, I think the only situation in which Drake Maye plays this year but starts later than after that would be, nothing to play for. Let's just get him in and get him some reps if he's still working on it. I also do think that despite the fact that I think there are some factors in what his role is like on the Patriots, team that probably doesn't have a lot to play for this year. Also team whose, lead front office executive comes from that Packers organization where quarterbacks have sat for significant periods of time. Despite all that, I do want to acknowledge that the history of quarterbacks who get drafted in a position like where Drake Maye has been drafted says that they're going to play. But I'm just inclined to say like month of December. The Patriots have a reasonably tough schedule. I mean, if he's looking good early, I think you want to avoid. There's a stretch. What is this? Week 1, 2, weeks 3 and 4. They've got at the Jets. Potentially, that's before things fall off the rails in New York, and then at 49ers. And I don't want my young quarterback super early on dealing with that defense. Then you come home, you've got the Dolphins at home. That's October 6th. If he's way ahead of schedule, maybe somewhere in there.
Week 9, maybe? I was thinking week 9 after, like you said, this schedule is hard.
It's especially hard schedule.
It's one of the hardest schedules in the NFL.
Jets defense, Niners defense, like that Miami defense could be a lot better. A lot of talent on it. Mike McDaniel type. Again, my name's Mike McDonald type defense now coming down there. DeMeco Ryans defense the week after that. The Jags are fine, and then the Jets again, and then after that are the Titans. I feel like that's a good first start for him.
All right, I have one more scenario. Let me see if the mic picks up this knock. Hey, Gerard. Yeah, it's Robert and Jonathan. How you doing? Yeah. So we're 1-4. The fan base is kind of annoyed. I know the schedule's been tough, but we didn't think the defense was good. I know we lost the best defensive coach in NFL history, but people were telling me this defense was going to be good going into the season. And we did a little excitement where these Drake Maye jerseys. Like maybe are you sure the kid's not ready to be out there? I'm just saying, we know the owners are involved in a lot in New England now. There's going to be some point, like they can say they're going to be patient. At some point, they're going to want to see this gem that they drafted here be on the field and get add a little juice to the fan base, add a little excitement to the operation. And so that's something else to keep in mind. When do the Crafts want Drake Maye to be out there? It might not necessarily just be a Gerard Mayo decision.